they need to later they need to key in all the information of the suspected dengue cases in our we call it e-dengue e-notification system. Before they key in the information, they have to make sure that the case is confirmatory to dengue through either NS1, IgM, IgG. This is the policy that we used since 2014. Okay. Once case is verified by the receiving district, the case will then be transferred to another system. We call it e-dengue system. Basically, e-notification system and e-dengue system are related, but they are actually two different systems. The case investigation will be subsequently carried out within 24 hours, after which dengue control will take place. As you all know, vector-borne diseases such as dengue cause deaths and mobility. It is also an obstacle to social and economic development, which lead to loss of working hours and high cost of treating disease. The second SOP is related to dengue control. There is a source reduction of Aedes larvae population. It is also must be carried out in 24 hours after case notified into e-dengue system. The Aedes inspection and source reduction must cover 100% of the total premises in that locality within 3 days. So meaning to say they have to finish the Aedes inspection in 3 days. So you must cover 100% of the premise in that locality. So the area coverage is 200 meters for single case and 400 meters in case of outbreak. And it covers indoor and outdoor source reduction. The third SOP is space spray of adult Aedes population. Just like source reduction, space spray must be step up within 24 hours after case notified into our e-dengue system. Premise coverage in the area must be at least 80%. So just now for soil reduction, we have to cover 100%, but for space spray, we have to make sure that we cover at least 80% of the total premises. We don't expect 100% here, since it is impossible to complete the space spray in a day. So you cannot resume the work the next day, okay? Because it is different from source reduction. So the area coverage is still 200 meters for single case and 400 meters in outbreak situation. So in order to have a maximum impact, thermal fogging must be complemented with VLV in outbreak situation to increase high acceptance by the premise owner. Indoor fogging will be using water-based insecticide, or else they may refuse entry for indoor fogging. The fourth SOP is larvae shading. So for larvae shading, all spots that are potentially harbor any breeding will be larvicided, especially in the back lane, empty lot where breeding is commonly found. So in that case, normally we use either thermopause or BKI. Okay, the fourth SOP is outdoor residual spray. Even though residual spray has been practiced long time ago as a method, it is basically a novel approach in Malaysia, and it first started in 2015. As far as RS is concerned, we are very selective in this manner. Okay, only the hotspot locality with outbreak situation, with outbreak duration of more than 30 days will be selected and sprayed. Since the suitable insecticide in the market is limited for the AS, and based on our less experience doing this method, we believe that the insecticide can only last for 3 months for dengue control, since we spray mainly outdoor and indoor. Unlike for malaria control, we spray indoor, right? So the sixth SOP is the release of adult Wolbachia mosquito. It is also considered a new tool in dengue control in Malaysia, which was first introduced in 2019 as a part of operational method. We are taking up a replacement method for the mosquito release, whereby we release both male and female Aedes aegypti in the wild. So up to now, we have around 30 localities nationwide, which embark on this Wolbachia project. So we believe that after 15 weeks of first release, 60% of the Aedes wild population had been replaced by Aedes carrying Wolbachia. So it is possible, even though difficult. That is what we had experienced so far. Okay, now here's the, I would like to share with you the current situation, the current dengue situation in Malaysia as of EPID week 4 this year. Okay, as you see on the screen, we have seen an increase by 204% compared to the same period of last year. So this year we already have almost 9,000 cases compared to 3,000 cases last year. As for mortality, there are 400% increase this year. Last year we have none dengue deaths. So the increase is big, quite big. Okay. From the table, we can see that from 2010 and 2022, Malaysia had a fluctuating trend of dengue cases. You can see the trend, right? Okay. And I think our neighboring countries also experience the same pattern. Okay, as you can see in the table, our highest number of dengue cases ever recorded was before COVID-19 pandemic. Okay, that was in 2019, and with over 130,000 cases. The second was in 2015 with over 120 cases. Okay, now we come to the summary of dengue epidemiology in 2022, which is last year. Okay, I will give you a brief summary on that. About 55% of cases was sporadic. Altogether, there were almost 8,000 outbreak localities, with some having occurrence of outbreak of more than one episode. And 85% of the cases were among mobile group, which include school-going children and working adults. So one can make a hypothesis as to where they got the infection from. So there is probably outdoor transmission away from home. Okay, so how did we perform in dengue control? As for single case, we only managed to cover 60% of the total cases, especially in Klang Valley area. The complete inspection was around 40%. Complete means you managed to inspect outdoor and indoor, with only 35% of targeted premises for indoor. As for outbreak, we perform better in this manner, with 75% of the total cases covered. The complete Aedes inspection was much lower, just around 30%, with only 32% of targeted premises for indoor. So we find it difficult, to do dengue control as far as space spraying is concerned. Okay. What are the challenges? Now we come to the what are the challenges of dengue control that we are facing? Okay, for control measures such as premise inspection, space spray, larviciding, targeted outdoor residue spray, refuse entry and obstruction of duty are among the challenges. How do we overcome this? Okay, we have a law and an act, we call it Destruction of Disease-Bearing Insect since 1975. Okay, so we have to be strict with our law here. So we use section 5, bracket 5 and section 21, and we even take some of them to court. Okay, upon conviction, they can be fined not exceeding 100,000 ringgit or to imprisonment for a term of not exceeding 2 years or both. Okay, the third one is refusal to give information required by the investigating officer is also punishable under section 7 bracket 1 of the act. Okay, then vacant house is also a challenge in Malaysia. So we have to seek cooperation from the local authority or joint board management or JMB to help us identify the owner of the premise for our further action. So the other one is we also encounter problem when the owner of the units let their dog loose free. So some of dogs are a bit aggressive. Okay, a bit aggressive. It can pose a threat to our staff. Okay, and rainy season is also a problem. During a year, there are an average of 240 rainy days, especially in the late afternoon, which make it difficult. Okay, make it difficult, to do space spray. So we need to reschedule the timetable, okay, to the next day, which may result in many more cases left unattended. Okay, we cannot cover all cases in that case, in that manner. Okay, the next is especially in the high burden state, especially in Klang Valley, that's in Kuala Lumpur, only 20 to 30% of reported cases are covered. Okay, due to lack of resources. So to overcome this, we employ pest control operators, to help us do space spray or source reduction. Okay, low premise coverage and below par performance are the other problems that that we are facing. So to overcome this, close supervision need to be in place regularly, and at the same time we need to do something, to build up the staff confidence and self-confidence by organizing some series of motivational training. Okay. Next is the challenges is house closed during office hours. For premise inspection, just like I mentioned earlier, the coverage was around 30%. Normally, we do the inspection during office hours, but our law, under our law, section 5 bracket 5 premise it permits us to conduct the inspection after 6 to 10 p.m. So meaning to say after office hours, when the owner of the house already returned home from work, we can go to the house and do the inspection from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. Okay. Next is the no Aedes breeding found. Sometimes breeding is not found even though the source of infection is believed to be locally transmitted. In certain districts, 70% of the activity carried out was zero breeding. So again, close supervision is needed in this case. Plus, check the quality of the control activities. Okay. As for thermal spray, among the challenges are we find that through our monitoring, the dosage of insecticide is insufficient. and there is a possibility of resistance being developed in Aedes population. So rotation of insecticide is one of the options that we used to do beside close supervision. We also face problem in the same challenges in ULV space spray, just like in thermal space spray. So more or less the same measures are being taken up. This is close supervision and rotation of the insecticide. Okay, as for ORS and the release of Wolbachia infected Aedes, lack of training and dedicated staff, as well as financial support, are the things that limit the extension of the method to other localities. So we need to say we cannot expand the locality to many more areas, as they are quite new in Malaysia. So we need to convince the government to give more money or more budget, for us to expand this method to the other state. Okay, but in some states we also employ PCOs or pest control operators to do ORS, or maybe in the future probably we can outsource the Wolbachia project. Okay, the other problem is the abundance of Aedes aegypti in the Wolbachia release area. So the abundance of Aedes aegypti around the release area will affect the sustainability of the Wolbachia infected Aedes aegypti. So need to do source reduction as well as regular BTI larviciding. So now we come to the conclusion as suggested by the WHO. Measure for dengue vector control. Existing vector control approaches has failed to curb dengue transmission, but continue to be used despite absent evidence of their effectiveness. So the present and conventional methods are less successful. I can say that less successful in managing the dengue transmission. So there is a need to review the current strategy of dengue control. Okay. Next, effort for vector control must be based on transdisciplinary of the IVM element. So in a single control intervention approach may not have any substantial impact. So for future direction on dengue control should focus on integrated tools such as Wolbachia infected Aedes aegypti program. Another for the way forward. Okay, number one, we have to make sure that IVM is already in place. So vector control does not rely on a single intervention. So we need to do more. So whenever possible, environmental, biological, and chemical must complement each other in what is known as IVM. The optimal use of resources for vector control to improve efficacy and effectiveness, ecological soundness, and sustained vector control program. We have a systematic review conducted by Health Transmission Technology Assessment team in 2019 shows that IVM could substantially reduce the cost of dengue control. In this review, it was found that over 3 years, from 2016 to 2018, the total cost we can save total cost saving from reduction of dengue case 101 million by 13.08%. So if you do IVM, we can save some money by embarking on this IVM. Okay, the way forward, the second one is biological control method, Wolbachia infected Aedes. Wolbachia is probably the control method that we could expand to all states in Malaysia. Okay, and then community mobilization and empowerment. Community need to be mobilized to do self-inspection. and source reduction in their surrounding. As of now, we have around, sorry, there's typing error there. We have around 3,257 combi project nationwide and involving 30,342 volunteers. So the last one, we also in cooperation of artificial intelligence concept, to predict outbreak, so in this case, we we have a good collaboration with Malaysian Space Agency for a correct or more precise prediction of dengue occurrence. So with that, I thank for your kind attention.
Thank you, Mr. Taufik, for summarizing the control measures that are immediately taken to curb dengue in Malaysia and also the challenges that are faced by the program operators. We will now move on to USA to hear from Ms. Australia, the Executive Director for the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District. She has been with the Florida Keys Mosquito Control District since 2003 and as Executive Director since 2016. Andrea has vast experience in dengue control in the Florida Keys for more than a decade, and together with Aedes aegypti control, she is also involved in programs to control other than Aedes aegypti species. Andrea, the mic is yours.
Mr. Omar, you might stop sharing your presentation, please.
Wait. Sorry, let's wait.
Thank you.
Okay, sir. Wah, ada soalan nih.
Okay. Thank you very much for that introduction. I really appreciate being able to come and talk to all of you about the little islands in the Florida Keys where we have started to see dengue cases occurring in the last 20 years or so. So I'll take you kind of through how we were controlling dengue and really the use of our wide area larvicide spraying throughout the Florida Keys. So just a little bit of background. You can see the Florida Keys are located at the southernmost tip of the state of Florida in the United States. We are a long island chain. We have about 1,700 islands, but only 42 of those are connected by bridges. And we're about 350 square kilometers in length. Our district itself is responsible solely for mosquito control. We're what is called a special taxing district. So we do have a board of elected officials that set our budget every year, and our sole purpose is to control mosquitoes. We have about a $15 million operating budget, 70 employees, half of which are inspectors. And we really do our best to control mosquitoes to protect the environment as well as the tourist economy in the Florida Keys. So the Florida Keys are really quite diverse. We're made up of very urbanized areas, but we also have about 90% of that land that I was just talking about is protected lands, environmentally sensitive, either designated by the state of Florida or federally designated as environmentally sensitive. So it really is a couple of really different techniques when we're looking at controlling mosquitoes throughout the Florida Keys. As you can see here, the majority of the mosquitoes that we collect are what's called the salt marsh mosquitoes, the Aedes taeniorhynchus. Only about 2% of our collections of all the mosquitoes that we trap are Aedes aegypti, but that Aedes aegypti makes up for more than 10% of our annual mosquito control budget and about half of our chemical budget. So as you can see, we really do a lot to make sure we're controlling those Aedes aegypti mosquitoes. And this is really why we in the Florida Keys and actually in Florida had not seen cases of locally acquired dengue since the 1930s. And then fast forward to 2009, and we started seeing locally acquired cases pop up in Key West specifically. I'm sure, as we all know, the number of cases of dengue throughout the world have continued to rise. So we're going to see more introductions. So as long as we have those Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, we're going to continue seeing potential locally acquired cases. So this really was the impetus of what started our real focus on Aedes aegypti control. Prior to this, we were really concerned with mainly nuisance mosquitoes. We did have a large number of inspectors, but most of their day was spent going through salt marshes, looking for mosquitoes and treating them. So we really had to step up what we were doing in the Florida Keys when these dengue cases first started. So you can see in 2009 and 2010, we had an outbreak of just under 100 locally acquired cases. And then again in 2020, we saw locally acquired cases actually on the opposite end of the Florida Keys in Key Largo. So it is something that we're constantly concerned with. So what we did really when we first started, again, our first bout with dengue fever since the 1930s, is it was all hands on deck. This again is in 2009. And these next few slides will kind of take you through what we did every single day, which was going to every single house that we possibly could, treating any standing water, doing handheld adulticide treatments, mainly ULV treatments, and then trying to educate the public. So you can see we're going through the city of Key West, really focusing in on the areas of concern, which are highlighted in yellow. And just really covering the entire island with all of our inspectors. We were lucky that we had the number of inspectors that we did. We pulled in all of our employees, and for about 6 weeks straight, every single day, 10-hour days, including weekends, we were out going through all of these neighborhoods. By the end of it, again, it's extremely labor intensive. It was a lot of work. And what we found is that, those repeated sweeps of those in high interest areas, while they did help in eliminating larvae, people did not like seeing us on their property once a week. We don't have those laws in place that will allow us to get onto properties and do what we need to do necessarily unless we have a declared emergency. So the residents didn't necessarily like us coming on their property. Another thing that we saw by going to these households every single week is that we weren't getting the community support necessarily that we needed, right? You would go, you would flip over a bucket, come back the next week, the bucket is turned back over and is breeding mosquitoes once again. So it was quite disheartening, just focusing on this technique solely. As far as control of adults went, we did have great control using those handheld ULV foggers as pictured here in the bottom right. We did not find that aerial and truck adulticiding worked very well for us during this time frame. And during this time frame, we also discovered the amount of resistance that we were starting to see in our population to pyrethroids. So again, that threw another wrench into trying to control these mosquitoes. So at the end of the day, we added additional personnel. We added 10 new inspectors. What we found is that when we weren't all hands on deck, it takes about a month to get to every single location throughout the Florida Keys. And so, the age-old question is, how can we treat everything at once? We get a significant amount of rainfall, and if it takes us a month to get to every single place after that rainfall, what exactly are we doing? So we really started brainstorming, what can we do? What can we add into all of these other things that we're currently doing that could really help us cover a larger area? And that enters into the aerial application of Vector-Borne WDG using the WALS technology. When we have helicopters, we have 4 helicopters and 2 airplanes, so we have the capacity to be able to do something like this. When we first started talking, we were even discussing potentially putting out granular larvicide over residential areas. Glad that we kind of squashed that, since that may have been a nightmare for us. But this liquid BTI over residential areas was really a game changer for us. When we first started looking at this, I know we worked very closely with Selena and the Valent team, but we had never done anything like this in the United States. But we were really interested to have that rapid coverage, wondering, could this treat those containers that maybe we couldn't find? It also is very specific. Again, we're in the Florida Keys, so we're surrounded by a national marine sanctuary. So what we're putting out into the environment is extremely important. So we wanted to make sure if we were doing wide area spraying, that it was with a product that was very specific. So again, we were excited to try this out. So we started these discussions right after our dengue outbreak back in 2010. It was a great theory, but did it translate? And so the next few slides, I'll take you through all of the work that we put into this. We began again in 2010, doing some initial cup trials, and we did find very good mortality in those initial cup trials. And those were just placed, out in the open. So after we knew, okay, it does get to the ground, it is making a difference. What about real life scenarios? So we had our inspectors go around, leave larvae in the field, go ahead and treat it, and then come back and check it after that treatment. And again, saw excellent larval mortality after 24 hours. So those initial studies said, okay, let's do this. This is something that could actually make a difference for us. So we went ahead and purchased all of the equipment that we need for operations. The systems that we're using are an Isolair spray system with Micronair spray heads. We have a mix truck set up so we can mix large quantities of the Vector-Vac WDG with water. And then we continued working on making sure that this was making a big difference for us. So you can see the next few studies that we did hidden cup trials where we were hiding cups in very dense vegetation. We were checking container indices, also looking at overall adult control, how about these treated areas versus areas that we weren't treating? And we did find that we were reducing our adult population by about 50%. And then found that when it comes to large and small containers, there really was no significant difference in the control. So, excellent results throughout this time frame. So our current setup is, excuse me, sorry. We have a 200-foot lane separation on our helicopter. We fly at 100-foot altitude. The blades are a pitch of 40, and then we fly at about 80 miles an hour. What we found in the Florida Keys, they're very used to our helicopters, so we really didn't have any sort of public pushback by flying over residential areas. And again, found excellent control, which is why we continued using this. Currently, our aerial WDG missions are rain dependent. So we look for about an inch of rainfall, especially in the Key West area. So we're still really focusing on the Key West area. That is where we're seeing most of our travel related cases. That's where we had our dengue outbreak in 2009 and 2010. So we do really focus still in that area. However, again, in 2020, we did have about 70 locally acquired cases on the other end of the Florida Keys as well. So we have started doing more applications in some of those other areas that we think, we may see these introductions. And again, this is great for any areas that we're seeing high vector numbers as well. So again, I'm going to reiterate what we just heard. There is no silver bullet when it comes to Aedes aegypti control, right? What we need to do is we need to do everything that's available to us. So we've continued to do all of the other things that we were doing before we added this aspect. Again, added more inspectors. We're focusing on larger containers in these areas and really working on source reduction, directly applying long-term larvicides, whether it's spinosad or methoprene, and still continuing handheld ULV applications of adulticide, mainly using malathion. We have a very robust education as well. We go to business owners, homeowners, we speak wherever people will listen to us, and we're still hoping that we can get, that public buy-in. Unfortunately, being a special taxing district can work against us because people, pay for our services. So then they expect us to be out there and provide those services instead of them actually walking around their property and helping us out as well. So we're really still trying to work on that combination. We are doing ground truck applications of this as well, and find that that is working to really pinpoint those high vector neighborhoods. And then as far as aerial, we're continuing that aerial larviciding, but we're coupling it with adulticiding when we see
Oh, Andrea, we lost you there suddenly.
I think I'm back. Am I back?
Yes, you're back.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
All right, let's see if we can pop right back in.
Sure.
Okay, how are we? We good?
Yep.
Okay, sorry about that. I'll blame my kids. I think they're on the Wi-Fi.
No worries.
Okay, so the aerial work, we are treating about 20,000 acres a year. I do expect that to continue to increase again, because we're seeing more and more travel-related cases of dengue and more introductions into the Florida Keys. But what we have seen is that, those adult numbers have really dropped down. So we're only doing about one aerial adulticide mission over Key West every year. So we are finding that the combination is making a big difference for us. There she goes. Okay. And so you can kind of see the catch rate is a little jumbly, but I'll get back into that a little bit more. But when you look at the house index, which are the percent of Aedes aegypti positive inspections, you can really see a reduction from 2010 down to current. So we are seeing that larviciding is making a big difference when it comes to the number of Aedes aegypti larvae that we're finding. And then really drilling down into the Key West Aedes aegypti adult catch rate. 2010, again, was the year that we had the outbreak. And you can see, our average is the black line. So it's much less. Our average isn't even really getting to our threshold, which is 10 Aedes aegypti per trap per night. We did hit that a couple of times last year, but again, that's really the average for us. So we are seeing a huge difference in the total number of Aedes aegypti, where we're really focusing on, all aspects, including that aerial application of liquid larvicide. And then just again, to reiterate, when we're combining that with adulticide, we are getting a pretty major knockdown of those Aedes aegypti. Some other uses that we've done recently, we have had invasive species introduction. So Aedes albopictus is not found normally in the Florida Keys. We have found it, went through and did a number of these ground treatments and, have eliminated it where we found it. Again, those ground treatments are great for being able to really hone in on small areas that you may be just responding to disease or high vector population. So again, this is something that we're going to continue to expand upon. And with that, I just wanted to acknowledge all of the staff that have spent countless hours and years on this, and that the Valent Biosciences team that has really helped us out. So thank you all.
All right. Thank you, Andrea. I believe many of us would have questions for both Dr. and Andrea. Please immediately note them down in the Q&A portal. Our next speaker will be Dr. Philip Todet. Dr. Philip, would you be able to share your screen?
Yes, but I can't start my video because you have turned it off.
Let me see here.
All right, here we go.
All right. Dr. Philip is currently a professor at the Department of Biological Sciences, Florida International University since 1992 to date. He has more than 70 scientific publications on different aspects, focusing on birds, fish, and mosquitoes. Dr. Philip is more than an academician. He was the mayor of City of South Miami, Florida for 10 years until 2020. He always brings forth his knowledge and information through media to the public. So today, we are very privileged to hear from Dr. Philip. We are eager to hear his view on Zika dengue control in the US. Dr. Philip?
Well, hello. Thank you for inviting me. It's wonderful, at least to be giving a seminar in Malaysia, although I didn't get the benefit of being able to travel and enjoy the food. As the introduction said, I was a biology professor who was also serving in public office when in 2016, Zika crossed the Pacific Ocean and wound up in Miami, Florida. And we had here in Miami the very first outbreak of Zika. And if you remember, the strain that made it across the Pacific picked up a gene complex that was causing tremendous neurological damage to unborn fetuses, and people were panicked, destroyed the tourist economy that year, and pregnant women left town. It was a very scary time. And so the Miami-Dade County has a mosquito control division contained within the solid waste division of the county. But even the governor got involved, and they wanted everybody to use the most powerful methods and insecticide they had. But the basic science wasn't there. People didn't know how to control Aegypti in Miami, in a truly urban area. The Florida Keys actually was far ahead of us. But with the word coming down from the governor that you had to use everything, Miami-Dade County threw the kitchen sink at these mosquitoes. And I, who was interested in mosquito control, was able to predict pretty much what was going to happen. And I'll show you what did happen and how this played out and what I think are the lessons from this story. So this was a paper that I published analyzing these data, and I can tell you that it made me extremely unpopular in the mosquito control community. People did not want to hear what I had to say. But this was the area, part of Miami, where Zika first appeared. And this is an area that's very popular with tourists just north of the downtown. Lots of restaurants and sidewalk dining. And that's probably where and why it got started. So what the county did was they applied Naled organophosphate over a very wide region. And then within the smaller section, they applied BTI as well. And it was done with initially from the air, and then they brought in buffalo turbines and trucks and blew it up into the air. So it wasn't the experiment I would have designed, but it does give you the possibility for some sorts of comparisons. Not surprisingly, Zika then showed up in Miami Beach on the other side of Biscayne Bay in the south end, South Beach it's called, which is the most popular with tourists. They applied ester pyrethroids, they applied the organophosphate Naled, and then eventually they brought in BTI as well. But because they messed around with pyrethroids for so long, Zika spread up to the mid-beach area, and they began doing control up there as well. But they learned that the ester pyrethroids weren't working, so they tried non-ester pyrethroids. They tried BTI. They didn't bother with a Naled, which was actually smart, and I'll explain why in a minute. So in the first area, Wynwood, these are the trap counts. And I've divided them up into 4 different phases. So initially, you can see that mosquito counts were high. Andrea mentioned that 10 is sort of the threshold for having a lot of Aedes aegypti, and they were coming in around 18 to 20. Then, after the first attempt at knocking them down with organophosphates, they brought them down to below 10 for the most part. They got lower yet, and then they rebounded a little bit. And let's see why they followed this pattern. So this is a busy slide, but I'll take you through it. So these blue dots up here at the top, those were applications of pyrethroids, lots of different pyrethroids, by the way. They tried everything. And as you can see, looking at the counts of mosquitoes, pyrethroids did not do a thing. And this is not surprising if you know our mosquitoes, because most of them have sodium channel mutations that confer fairly high resistance against pyrethroids. And the prevalence of these mutations are fairly high in Miami. Then they brought in the organophosphate. So here's the first nailed spray, and it really knocked down the number of adults. And they were quite encouraged by this. They tried it again a few days later. They knocked them down just about to zero. And you might think they'd won the war, but then the mosquitoes kept recovering. Every time they'd spray them, they recovered. But these green bands here, these are the applications of BTI, and I've feathered them because BTI loses its effectiveness in a hot, humid climate after 1 to 2 weeks' time. But they ran BTI even after they stopped the adulticides. And then they stopped using BTI, and you can see a little bit of rebound in the mosquito population. So I think the message here is that pyrethroids do not work in Miami. Nailed kills mosquitoes, but doesn't hold them down. And I think there's some reasons for that. And I also have reason to think that killing mosquitoes is not the same thing as controlling arboviruses. That the females who are infected tend to have taken a blood meal and they hide, so you're killing all the newly emergent females, but you're not necessarily killing the ones that have the virus. But this lower area here and the rebound really implicate BTI as being the thing that's most effective at controlling urban Aegypti. And we'll see more of this when we get to Miami Beach. So if we had this nice built-in experiment here, what you can see is in the areas where they ran nailed only, that the population rebounded, but where they combined it with BTI, they held the population down. So that's a very convincing demonstration that that BTI is important for controlling urban Aedes aegypti. Come on, computer. All right, so let's go over to Miami Beach. And they began applying pyrethroids in Miami Beach. It really didn't do anything. They brought in nailed, and I didn't think it was going to work in Miami Beach because of the structure of the buildings and the winds coming in off of the ocean. And indeed, it didn't appear to do much. It didn't appear to do anything, in fact. But then they finally got the trucks in. They had to acquire the trucks and the blowers, and the population went down and stayed down. It looks to be very effective, and I'll break down these numbers in a minute for you. So let's just look at the data during the decline, and it fits very nicely with a regression curve, a very tight fit. But if you look at the particular days where they applied the organophosphate nailed, on that first one, there's no decline, and in fact, it's higher the next day. The second one, they get a bit of a knockdown, and it's again above the line the next day. The third one, there's no effect at all. And the fourth one, there's maybe a little bit of a knockdown. But just the bouncing around of the line, whether or not they're spraying, doesn't suggest that the organophosphate is really doing anything. So let's look at this a little more carefully. We'll look at the residuals. That is what happens. Look at the data after you subtract the regression line. And again, compare that with the organophosphate application. This application here, the first one, essentially there's residual is 0. The second one has a negative residual, but it's higher the next day. The third one is 0, and the fourth one is pretty close to 0. So it really does not look like the organophosphate is having any effect. And if we do a comparison, we look at the day after an organophosphate application and subtract the day before, which is going to show the change. What you see is there's actually an increase with the first one, a decrease with the second one, somewhat of a decrease with the third, and a little bit of a decrease with the fourth. But the first three of these are not statistically significant. You get a statistically significant, decline the fourth time you use it, but you get statistically significant increases and decreases just randomly with no applications whatsoever. So mosquito populations do fluctuate dramatically on their own with no intervention whatsoever. So it's hard to tell the natural fluctuation background from the adulticide applications, at least on this site. So I just wasn't, and I'm still not convinced that there was any effect of the organophosphates whatsoever. But the BTI had a really dramatic effect. So that's the take-home message from Miami Beach. No effect of adulticides, and declines followed the prolonged use of BTI. But there's something I wanted to look at in these data. And what a lot of adulticiding studies that have looked very carefully at the data have found is that after you adulticide, there's a rebound in the mosquito population. And so this is just a little chunk of the data from Wynwood, but it shows something pretty interesting that I wanted to bring to your attention. So after these two adulticiding applications, there was a significant knockdown of adult female Aegypti. And I think that's a pretty robust effect here in Wynwood. But what's interesting is that 2 to 3 days afterwards, you get a very significant increase. And in some cases, the population is even higher than it was before you sprayed. And that's really counterintuitive. I mean, if you're killing mosquitoes, like how are they coming back even higher? And so this observation of the rebound effect is not a new observation. It's been seen a number of times, and people have proposed an explanation, and they've suggested that there's release from larval competition, that the adulticide is maybe killing the small larvae and allowing the big ones to grow faster, and that's why you get this rebound. But it doesn't work, and it doesn't work for two reasons. First of all, in an area like Wynwood, that is the dominant mosquito. There's no competition from other species. But more importantly, if you know the life history of Aedes aegypti, they spend in a warm climate like Miami about 2.5 days as pupae. And so they're not in competition with other larvae. They've already eaten all they're going to eat. And so these mosquitoes that are rebounding were pupae during the spraying. So they were not affected, and they were not released from competition. So there has to be something else going on. And I've looked at all the various possibilities, and one of the things that seemed possible, and I'm wondering, I've got my screen. I don't know about you guys, but my picture here is showing just let's see if I can fix this. My picture is blocking part of the screen here. Can anybody, do you guys just have me up in the corner, or is it?
Well, we can see your PowerPoint slide, but we don't see any pictures. But the PowerPoint slide with your graph
Okay.
are those things.
Oh, good. Okay, good. All right. So one of my students and I did an experiment. We figured out the dose of permethrin, a pyrethroid, that would not kill spiders. And so we went out and sprayed that on a lot of spider webs. We removed the spider, sprayed it on the web, and then an hour later we damaged the web. And orb weaving spiders typically take down their web at night. They leave up the main lines, and they take out the spiral mesh, and they eat that and then reweave it. And we did so. We had control spiders that just got the acetone carrier, and we damaged both sets of webs. And then we came back 24 hours later, and we looked at the web, photographed it, and we saw that the webs were relatively impaired in the spiders that had received permethrin. And then we took mosquitoes in an aspirator and shot them into the web, and found that the catch rate was extremely low. These are the ones that got permethrin. So essentially 100% catch rate in the controls, and about 25% catch rate in the non-lethal permethrin treatments. And so what we think is happening here is that we go back to that rebound, is that we've probably impaired the spiders, the urban spiders that are living under the eaves of buildings and in the bushes around buildings, that are naturally catching a lot of Aedes aegypti. And having impaired those spiders, there's much lower mortality. And that's what's accounting for the rebound in adults, not larval competition, but in fact, release from predation. And people never correctly estimate the number of spiders in an urban environment, but particularly around houses, they're up under the eaves of the buildings, and they're just in every little space. And these are the spaces Aegypti like to hang out. So we don't know for sure. We haven't done the definitive experiment yet, but we think it's very likely that the adulticides are incapacitating the predators, and that's what's allowing the rapid rebound of urban mosquitoes after an adulticide application. Of course, with BTI, that's not a problem. So the takeaways that we got from this study is that, first of all, that BTI greatly depresses the urban Aegypti population over a period of weeks. And in South Miami, where I was the mayor, we asked the county to come in and begin doing prophylactic BTI applications at the beginning of every summer, which they've done. Now, I have two little asterisks, and that's a reminder to myself about two things to think about. One is, as Andrea pointed out, in Key West, they got about 70% control. And part of the problem they've had in Key West is that there's a lot of cisterns where people used to keep water, particularly, and they're still there, and you can't reach them with aerial BTI application. And likewise, hot tubs are popular, at least in the wintertime, but in the summertime, they've got a cover, but of course, Aegypti can get in, but the BTI doesn't get in. So there's just these pockets of water that are hard to treat from the air, and that may be harboring that other 30%. The other thing's a little note, and that is that you should not be breathing the vector-bac WG. That it's not toxic to humans, but the particulate matter is just something that people should not be breathing. So during the actual dusting, it's good for people who are outdoors to wear a dust mask. Everybody's got masks now for COVID. That's great, but don't go breathing this stuff directly. It's not going to poison you, but it's not going to do you any good. And we had a number of people who were out jogging when it came by, and they were very sorry that they hadn't taken cover for a couple minutes to let the stuff settle. But other than that, we've been extremely happy with it. we find that the adulticide effects are transient at best and ineffective overall. And we think that that predators are likely the reason, impairment of predators is the reason for the rebound that's typically seen after adulticide applications. So that's it. And if there's any time, I'll take questions, or we'll just pass it off to the next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Philip, for an insightful presentation. Again, I would like to encourage all participants to immediately note down your questions and comments to Dr. Philip, Andrea, and Topik. We would discuss more during the Q&A session. All right, we will now be taking a short break. So please be back here by 10:18 a.m. to proceed with the second session of the webinar.
Hello, can you hear me, Selena? Hello.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah, I can hear you, Rizal. We can hear you.
Rizal, share your slide now. Right.
See my slide.
Yes. Maybe we wait for another minute. Or can we start now?
We can start now. It's 10:20.
All right. Okay, welcome back, everyone. We shall start with our second session for this webinar. So our fourth speaker will be Reza Bohari. Mr. Reza Bohari is a senior entomologist with the Ministry of Health Malaysia for 16 years. He is stationed in Cebu Divisional Health Office, Sarawak, which is located in the Borneo Island in East Malaysia. Reza is responsible for the control of mosquito-borne diseases, dengue and malaria, and other medically important pests. Reza, please share with us on how you and your team suppress and control dengue in Cebu Town, Sarawak.
Okay, thank you, Tio. So good morning, everyone. So welcome to my presentation slot. So as for today, I would like to share and allow me to share our experience in controlling dengue with Bacillus thuringiensis israelensis, or the short form is BTI, in our Cebu Town, Sarawak, Malaysia. So Cebu Division is one of the 12 administrative divisions of Sarawak, Malaysia, and is located in the island of Borneo. So the third largest division of the Miri Division and Kapit Division. So Cebu Division consists of 3 districts: Cebu District, Kanawit District, and Selangor District. So Cebu is capital city in the central region of Sarawak. So there are 2 major rivers in the Cebu Division, which we have the longest river in Malaysia, the Rejang Basin, and also the Igan River. So Cebu District is an administrative district in Cebu Division. So it can be divided into Cebu town area and the rural area. So Cebu District has been known to be dengue prone, and outbreaks have reported since the 80s. So starting in week 23 in 2014, so Cebu District experiencing continuous episodes of dengue outbreak with more than 10 to 70 dengue cases reported each week. So Cebu District contributed nearly half of the cases in 2014 Sarawak dengue statistic, and by week 8 in 2015, with 62% of the dengue fever cases in Sarawak state were coming from Cebu District. So there are 2 local authorities, namely the Cebu Municipal Council, SMC, and the SRDC, Cebu Rural District Council, that administers Cebu City and Cebu rural areas. So in 2008, we have introduced and divided the city into 31 operational zones in the urban area. So the zoning was actually an arbitrary zoning along the main road border at each zone. So the zone may vary in size, number of houses, and population. So this zoning system actually have helped us in many ways to stratify dengue cases and for control purposes. So we have identified 3 important zones in the urban area based on the number of dengue cases. So the hotspot zones were namely Zone 5, Tongsang, Zone 7, Tiong Hua, and Zone 14, Rejang Park. So this Zone 7, Zone 5, and Zone 14 in Cebu District, Sarawak, Malaysia, have experienced intense dengue transmission in 2014 and later on continued in 2015. So as you can see on the screen, it shows the escalating trend of the weekly dengue cases in each zone respectively, in Zone 5, Zone 7, and Zone 14 from 2013 until 2015. So our study zone was in Zone 7, Tiong Hua, based on the high number of cases from the other 2 zones. So the 2 other zones were selected as the control sites later. So in Zone 7, it was 131 hectare in size. The zone consists of residential and commercial building. So based on our previous survey, the larval habitats were predominantly outdoors. So this area also have dense vegetation, poor drainage with trash thrown to the drain, abandoned houses, and poor garbage disposal practice. So the current dengue strategy that have been implemented during at that time, adulticiding with pyrethroid and organophosphate, using thermal fogging and ultra low volume machine. So this adulticiding control activity was conducted once in every 3 days. Larviciding with thermophos in emulsion and sand granules formulation, and also with vector-borne 12 aqueous suspension using hand pump sprayer in the surrounding area of the dengue cases homes. So the search and destroy activity, all potential larval habitats were also included into the dengue outbreak control. So removal of potential containers in illegal dumping site also conducted by the Cebu Municipal Council. So indoor aerosol insecticide spraying also be performed in case houses to kill any infected Aedes species mosquitoes. So, but however, despite intensive control measures, there was still persistent dengue outbreak and active transmission of the dengue virus for a stretch 57 weeks starting from week 25 in 2014 until week 28 in 2015. So there are many contributing factors. One is the wide dengue outbreak area. Two is the widespread of small containers habitat and layers of cryptic containers. So it was impossible for us to treat the area by spot treatment and to have good spraying coverage due to the high numbers of containers. So this hand pump sprayer only able to do spot treatment. So when the sprayer came across breeding sites, so the sprayer also have limited dispersal swathe from the sprayer, and this method of treatment unable to disperse the larvicide droplets into breeding grounds. So another factor could be due to partial susceptibility of our wild Aedes population to thermophos and adulticides. So our monitoring shows that Aedes aegypti and Aedes albopictus from the neighboring zone 6 and zone 14 have low larva mortality at WHO diagnostic dosage to thermophos. So at that point, to prevent and delay the widespread of thermophos resistant to other zones, so we decided to shift our spot treatment with chemical insecticide and bioinsecticide and introduce a new formulation, newer strength of 3000 ITU of BTI wettable granules to zone 7 at week 19 in 2015. So we started the pilot operational study in 2015, and later in 2016 and onwards was the integration of WALS into our current strategy for dengue control. So in 2015 pilot operational study, it was divided into 4 phases: the baseline surveillance, the pre-treatment, treatment, and the post-treatment phase. So it was started at week 19 and ended at week 41. So during the pre-treatment phase, the training to the spraymen were conducted as we shifted our spot treatment to wide area of larvicide spraying. So as I mentioned earlier, the zone 7 was estimated 131 hectare in size, but our focus area for treatment of BTI is only 12 hectares. So although artificial and natural containers were treated with wide area spray application method using backpack and stir. So the spray means covering potential and actual door larva habitats, including natural containers with axial vegetation, dry leaves, and artificial containers such as animal feeds, concrete and earth drain, sunken ground below the houses, discarded containers, garbage dumping site, and roof gutters. So at treatment of WALS with 3 units of backpack misting machine were conducted with phase 1 treatment, weekly treatment for 4 weeks, and then followed with fortnightly treatment for the subsequent 8 weeks. So the vector-borne dosage was 500 grams per hectare, and the spray mix was 1 to 5 grams in 12 liters of water. So the spraying was conducted at morning time between 8:30 and until 11:30. So the BTI mist spraying were also performed and targeted abandoned houses, log houses, and higher levels of building. So the spraymen were trained to hold the spray pipe of the mist blower to provide optimum coverage of the larval habitats and to use the suitable metering knobs to ensure enough BTI mix to treat the larval habitats. So we also perform the direct application method where we put the BTI directly to the potable containers, targeted all indoor and outdoor induced artificial containers within the house compound, and it was only done once for new containers, and we track the effectiveness. So, but however, we feel that this method are very laborious, and from our experience, this treatment method covered a very low percentage of the household. So because of that, we more focus on the outdoor BTI spraying. So a pre-treatment spray application exercise was conducted to determine the penetration of BTI microdroplets to the larval habitats. in the dense undergrowth and to reach habitats in the higher levels of buildings. So 20 transparent plastic containers without lids were placed randomly without the sprayman knowledge. So the containers were then collected and covered with lids 1 hour after spraying. So it was observed that the PTI droplets were effective for at least 21 days post-treatment with 97 to 100% larval mortality. So the mortality was recorded at 3 hours and 24 hours post-larval exposure. So the residual efficacy of the deposited PTI droplets in the containers was also measured on day 3, day 7, day 14, day 21, and day 28. So the larva mortality drastically reduced to 38% in the 28 days post-treatment samples. So in 2015, during the active dengue transmission in those hotspot sites, zone 7, zone 5, and zone 14, so our former public health medical officer in charge decided to evaluate the PTI larviciding with direct application and WALS into treatment area. So the impact of the outdoor treatment into cryptic containers with wide area PTI spray application was measured using the Orbit-Threat index. So in treated site, the Orbit-Threat index was suppressed and significantly lower in comparison to control site. So the Orbit-Threat index during the treatment phase was suppressed to less than 10%, a threshold value to initiate any vector control activity as the national Malaysian guidelines. So the Orbit-Threat index in control site remained high during the evaluation periods. So meanwhile, the impact of the direct PTI application into water holding containers was measured using the Aedes index and the Aedes larva pupa density. So Aedes index is significantly reduced during the treatment and post-treatment phases compared to control site. So there were no larvae and pupa production in the PTI treated containers during the treatment phase and the first 4 weeks of the post-treatment phase. So however, the containers were recolonized 5 weeks after the PTI treatment ended. So the impact of the larviciding with PTI on dengue cases was measured 4 weeks after we start on the PTI treatment. So the 4 weeks was classified as the window period where the surviving female adult mosquito were still able to transmit the dengue virus. So the integration of PTI treatment in the control program in 2015 has reduced the incidence rate by 51-fold reduction and maintained dengue free for at least 21 weeks. After the final treatment on week 35, except for we have 1 single cases on week 45. After that, no more cases until the end of the year. So however, the dengue cases resurfaced in week 4, 2016 in treated site. So this is because of the changes in the circulating dengue virus serotype in the community have led increase of the dengue cases. So where in 2014 and 2015 in the central region of Sarawak, it was dominated by dengue virus serotype 2, and while in 2016 the serotype were predominantly dengue virus serotype 1. So we activate once again the PTI WALS operation, but this time due to minimal workforce and logistic factor to combat the high magnitude of cases in other places. So we conducted only fortnightly PTI treatment on week 27, and cases start to decline with 6-fold reduction of incidence rate. So no cases recorded after week 37 and until the end of the year, except we have 1 single cases in week 39, week 42, and week 50. So no dengue outbreak were reported in the treatment site. So, but however, we saw observed a longer time span was taken for the impact of the PTI treatment in 2016 compared to 2015. And this could be due to not having a weekly wide area spray treatment at the start of the PTI larviciding program in 2016. So in non-PTI site, So in zone 5 and zone 14, where there is only conventional method control without the PTI WALS, only 6-fold of reduction of incident were observed in 2018. However, almost every week there were dengue cases in zone 5 and zone 14. And in zone 5, it was ended until week 44, but cases are still persist in zone 14. So compared to the PTI side, we have 51-fold of reduction. So in 2016, the control sites, there were dengue cases throughout the year and only 3-fold of reduction were observed. So compared to the PTI site with 6-fold of reduction. So this reduction in the control sites could be impacted by the intensive adulticiding conducted once in every day in the district. So for full description of the study, you can read the published paper as shown on the screen. So starting from 2017 and until current time, the WALS activity was introduced and expanded to other zones, either as for control or outbreak management and preventive programs. So when COVID-19 hits the world in 2020, there were disruption of other disease prevention globally, including the dengue program, which faced manpower shortage. So in the era of COVID-19 pandemic, where resources are limited and social distancing are required in certain countries, and this limit health personnel and community involvement in the dengue control. So in 2020, we managed to have a field trial to determine our suitability with our available 16 horsepower truck-mounted Fontan mobile star to spray BTI vector-borne WG in an urban commercial site, that is Cebu Central Market, Sarawak, for the control of dengue. And this machine can operate with minimal resources. So the study was conducted in 8-hectare site and performed at night time. So when the human traffic are minimal. So the ULB application of PTI treatment is recommended to be conducted in late evening or early morning, and we also perform spraying efficacy. So only 2 operators were involved to operate the ULB Fontan mobile star and proceed with the PTI spraying. So the operation was completed within 3 hours, including the preparation of the spray mix. And the result of the spraying efficacy were promising, with very good residual control from the spray path and backlens. So after BTI exposure from the ULB machine. So we think this method can be considered as an alternative and effective strategy for the local dengue control program. So other than epidemiological monitoring, you also proactively setting up Aedes monitoring station in the 3 districts to monitor increase and fluctuation of vector population and suppress it with new tools of control. So any indexes above the threshold value were encouraged to initiate any vector control activity as per the national guidelines. So we feel that the WALS or wide area BTI spray application method can be integrated with other control measures carried out in the control program to suppress vector population and autocryptic containers and interrupt disease transmission. And that's the end of my presentation. So we want to express our gratitude to the entomology team and the vector control team from Cebu Division of Health Office for the untiring works to ensure a community free from dengue and all other mosquito-borne diseases. So thank you so much for your interest and attention to my presentation.
Thank you, Reza. Before we move on to the next speaker, we have one participant, Miss Suraya Sulaiman. She raised her hand. So if you have any questions, maybe you can note down in the Q&A portal. All right, our next speaker will be Dr. Grayson Brown. Dr. Grayson, would you be able to load your presentation now?
Do you not see it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yep, we can see it now.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Dr. Grayson Brown is an internationally recognized public health entomologist and has been active for over 40 years. He is currently serving as an executive director for the Puerto Rico Vector Control Unit, responsible for vector management throughout Puerto Rico. I now welcome Dr. Grayson to present on fighting arbovirus disease in Puerto Rico with WALS.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm delighted to be able to speak at this important event. Puerto Rico is a small Caribbean island that is about 150 kilometers east to west, maybe 50 kilometers north to south. Has about 3 million people, most of whom are in, well, about a third of whom are in the San Juan area. This whole area is pretty much solid city, and we call it the metro area. And that's also where we get the majority of our dengue cases. Our current dengue situation looks sort of like this. We have a couple of hundred cases a month lately, but it's dropped off as the seasonal drop off in mosquito population. We had a really cold January down here, and so that suppressed mosquito activity and the resulting dengue. But the thing that is the more serious issue with us is that it's always been for the last several decades just dengue 1 here in Puerto Rico for the most part. Oops, excuse me. And but this past year we started getting dengue 2 coming in. And the problem with that is that most of the people, we have about 70 to 90% of the adults are seropositive. And because it's just been dengue 1, they're seropositive mostly to dengue 1. So now there's very little herd immunity to dengue 2, and dengue 2, especially when it follows 1, tends to cause a higher incidence of severe dengue, about double. You can see up here, about double the percentage of severe dengue that we were getting with just dengue 1. So I'm sure that once the mosquito population starts coming back, we can expect dengue 2 to be increasing throughout Puerto Rico, and probably be looking at a relatively large outbreak in this coming year. This is what the distribution of the cases looks like over the last year or so in the metro area. So there's not really a well-defined cluster anymore. There was for a while, and there still is in some parts of Puerto Rico, but in the areas where we get most of the dengue cases, not so much. We have about 2,500 traps in our monitoring network, our mosquito monitoring network. We test all of the mosquito pools that come out of that. We only have Aedes aegypti. We don't have Aedes albopictus. So aegypti we consider it to be our only significant dengue vector there. But the important thing here from our mosquito pool data is you can see about 7. It follows pretty much the same breakdown that you have with the human population. About 2/3 of the pools are dengue 1, about 1/3 of dengue 2. This time next year it'll probably be reversed. Dengue 2 will be much more common than dengue 1. But this gray line here, which is the mosquito pools that we were getting throughout 22, is the real story. Because you can see, starting in August, it started shooting up, and it has continued to go up. And so this gives us really quite a bit of concern with the positive pools going up, even while the population was in decline. So we've been really targeting the hotspots as they get up for the last 2 years now, and in our hotspot protocol. And I'm sorry, I took some of these slides out of other presentations that I didn't think, and some of these slides are in Spanish, so I'll have to try to. The Spanish is the dominant language here in Puerto Rico, and but most of us are bilingual. Anyway, I'll try to interpret if I can remember to do that. So our hotspot protocol relies on mosquito monitoring, individual inspections of homes and breeding sites, particularly targeting the more cryptic breeding sites like cisterns and septic tanks and that type of thing. Molecular testing for mosquito pools for the presence of dengue. We also test chikungunya and Zika at the same time, and we serotype any dengue we can find. And then we go house to house in most of our areas, handing out educational material, repellents, and in some cases nets to help people, especially after big storms when power goes out for large pieces of the island. We use AGO traps as a surveillance tool and also as a control tool. We can just put out so many traps that we can catch enough female Aegypti to actually drive the population down. And then WALS is one part of this protocol here. So like everybody else really here has said, WALS is really best used as a component in a more comprehensive management program. This shows the current hotspots that we're working in, and they're in some of the different cities. Really, the only thing that's important here is that in every one of those, WALS plays a relatively prominent role. Some of these we change up methodologies and components that we use there, depending on what the capacity is at the level of the municipality. But my unit does the WALS, and so we do it at each one of these hotspots. I'm going to be talking about an important number here, 3 females per trap per week. We believe that's a threshold level based on work that has been done by the CDC dengue branch, which is there in Puerto Rico. They're the ones that developed this trap. And so we consider this a threshold. This is our target population density. If we get the population density below that, then dengue goes down. If the density is above that, then dengue goes up. So that's not actually quite that simple, of course, we all know, but it is a simple number that we can give to our municipal colleagues that they can keep track of and use effectively. So we use these traps again, like I say, for surveillance and for control if we put enough of them out. We find that if we put about 3 of them out per house, we get good control. And so for a hotspot, that's the doable thing if the hotspot's not too big. One of the big problems that we struggle with, and this has been mentioned in some of the other talks today, is insecticide resistance. Permethrin-based product, Evolor, Permex, those kinds of things are pretty much the only ULV product that's used in Puerto Rico by the Department of Health. And you can see it's really almost effective. 4% mortality, 3%, 0%. In fact, we just finished a genomic study with some off-island colleagues, and they found KDR resistance at 4 different loci, and 3 of those loci appear to be at fixation. So it's basically hopeless. We basically have decided that we cannot use adulticides, traditional adulticides against Aegypti, and really the Puerto Rico Vector Control Unit has never recommended the use of adulticides for Aegypti control or dengue suppression. This is what that looks like operationally. So the yellow line here is the Aegypti population. The vertical red lines are dates when this particular city, Carolina, which is a large city, applied adulticides. And so they spray here and they spray here, and no effect on Aegypti, no effect on Aegypti, no effect on, the story, absolutely no effect whatsoever on the adult Aegypti as reflected in our counts. Still, Aegypti is one of 40 species that we have on the island, and the other 39 appear to be pretty susceptible to permethrin. So when they go out and they spray permethrin, they don't kill any Aegypti, but they get a whole bunch of other things. These are all mosquitoes that were killed, and we swept these up off of a 4 foot by 4 foot stoop. A lot of mosquito bodies in there, and it can really help. I mean, the nuisance value can be quite significant. This is a short video here of the catch that we got out of a single BG trap one night. This is all Aedes tenorincus, the black marsh mosquito, following a hurricane that we had. And in this particular area, actually, in a lot of area of Puerto Rico, at that time, there was no power. Power was out. It was hot. It was humid, and people were having to sleep with their windows open. And nobody has window screens, and so it was really made for miserable conditions there. Late afternoon, early evening, we were measuring 35, 40, things a minute. So it's pretty significant. Pretty significant problem. So the permethrin truck goes through there and really helps with that problem, but it doesn't help do anything with Aedes aegypti. So for that, fortunately, we do have larvicides that are sterile effective, and so we mostly use Vector-Bac WDG. We've been using it now for about 4 years. It does have an odor, it leaves some residue, but this doesn't really tolerate it pretty well. And in some of the places where we've been using it quite a bit now, if we use another product that doesn't have that odor, that doesn't have that residue, the people are suspicious. They wonder if we're just spraying water to make them feel good. They've got to where they if it doesn't have that characteristic odor, they're suspicious that it maybe it's not the good stuff. The local authorities don't object to it. They're pretty well convinced now that the product is just fine. They haven't had any problems reported anywhere in Puerto Rico, and so we're okay with that now. We mostly use the 25-pound drums. That's the most convenient size for us. We primarily apply them through truck-mounted mist blowers. Use 2 of them, Buffalo turbines and the smaller A1 Rangers. They are different units. Each one has its own set of advantages relative to the other one. But you go through here, Buffalo turbines, pretty widely used machine. We can also apply granular formulations, which we do sometimes. The important thing for us is that it has a higher capacity there, so you could load up the truck and you go spray, a larger number of acres. And also very important with us is that it's more rust resistant. And then the Ranger, though, is a lot less expensive. It's smaller and lighter, and you can put it on a smaller truck. Before I came to Puerto Rico, I did a lot of work in the Pacific, as far west as Indonesia, and we used a lot of these little trucks like this. And these little mini trucks, the beds fold down, the side walls fold down to make a complete flat bed here. And on a little truck like this, well, an A1 sprayer would be just fine. But this Buffalo turbine is going to be too heavy. It's going to be too long, and it would be a mistake to try to put that on that little truck. So depending on, the decision as to which of these 2 machines to go with also affects what type of vehicle you might have. There's a little bit of difference in the dispersion from the machines, but you have to go pretty far away from the spray in order to actually see it. This shows you 2 different water sensitive cards that were placed 100 meters away from a truck spray swath in very calm conditions early in the morning. Humidity was high, and okay, the Buffalo has more drops on that piece of paper, but frankly, we generally overlap our swaths in distances less than 100 meters. So I don't really think that it's that big of a deal. If we had these papers up closer, you really don't see much difference at all. So that's our analysis or our opinion of those 2 machines. We, like Andrea, we also tested this with different levels of exposure using bioassay cups that we would then come along later and add water and introduce mosquitoes to it. And what we found was what other folks have reported here tonight, and that is that you get pretty good penetration through vegetation here. You have, in this case, we'd have 10 different houses, and for most of those houses, you have 100% or near 100% kill, except for a couple which seem to have some kind of a problem, because even the open sky levels were down pretty well. But for most cases, it's able to get through this vegetation pretty effectively, surprisingly so, really. So how well does it work? Like I say, we've used this now for 4 or 5 years, and you know, I don't want to go through all of the hotspots that we've treated because it's been a bunch, but I'll show just a few very typical examples. So this was one from Dorado, which is right next door to San Juan, and we began with debris pickup, community education, all that stuff, and that helped drive the population down. The blue here is the Dorado, red is San Juan, which we were not working in at that time. And then when we started WALS, the Dorado line just keeps on going down and gets right at 5 mosquitoes, 5 females per trap per week. We were hoping to get below 3, but this got it down from, you know, much higher numbers overall. There was a tendency of the untreated San Juan population to drift down as well. This is December, but clearly the treatments had a bigger effect on the population in Dorado. We also have used it in quite a few public housing areas. We call them residenciales. This one in particular here, Alejandrino, we were running about 5, 6, 7 dengue cases per week in this particular one. It's a pretty good size one. We went out, set out a trap, some traps. We got 35 females the first week, and then we, you know, threw the kitchen sink at it, did all of our magic here, the various interventions that we used in our protocol, and the population started going down and went down after a week from 62 to 24 and then on down. The positive mosquito pools peaked at 10. That's 10 pools out of 40. So that's 25% of the pools were positive for dengue, all dengue 1. And those pools went down, then, you know, mirroring the drop in the mosquito population. And the human case count went to 0. This was in 2021. And it's been like, we haven't had any cases, I mean, at all. It's been a pretty long lasting level of control. I think really mainly because of the debris pickup, community engagement, and they, you know, they saw what was happening. I mean, they were seeing what was happening in terms of dengue cases. And so they have continued that with to at least to some degree. Another residencial had very similar results. The population went down, even though the population on the outside of that residencial remained relatively unchanged. So that was working pretty well. And then here in Caguas, we had another problem. This is actually just up to a few weeks ago. We started WALS back here when the population was around 15 or so per trap per week. Population went down pretty well. This was WALS plus control traps. Went down. It got down to around 2. We thought things were good. We stopped WALS. Population started coming back. Got up, and it looked like it might be getting ready to take off. So we restarted WALS. Population went down, and then we had a spray pump went out, and a couple of our people got COVID for the second time. And so we were crippled there for a little bit. The population started to drift up, and we got back up on our feet, and population has been driven down again. This I think was as of about 2 or 3 weeks ago. So we just stopped this about 2 weeks ago, and it still seems to be staying down. Culebra is one of the islands off the east coast of Puerto Rico, part of Puerto Rico that's populated. It's a very, very popular tourist site, one of the most beautiful beaches in the world, one of the top 5 rated beautiful beaches in the world, incredible beach. Anyway, we were monitoring this population, doing a variety of non-insecticidal methods. It was pushing the population down more or less, but we kind of hit a limit. We weren't going anywhere. So we introduced WALS out here. This was November or so, and we've continued to do that. WALS, and the population has drifted down to where it's consistently below that magic 3 3 mosquitoes per trap per week. So, altogether, our results are really a lot like the published scientific studies that have been reported, and a lot like the results that we've seen reported here in the other talks tonight. And that is that WALS is by itself really not quite sufficient. You'll get some reduction, significant amount of reduction, but not enough really to stop dengue. And it's too expensive really for at least for us, for an island-wide routine spray program. So it's not a tool that would be very effective in, say, a complaint-driven decision-making program where vector control is really in response to citizen complaints. WALS is not going to work very well in that situation. But when it's combined in a community engagement, debris pickup, trapping out, hotspots, an overall integrated vector management program, especially if you're dealing with a highly insecticide-resistant Aedes aegypti population, where there's really not very many other options, well, then WALS really has an important role. And really, given the level that we have in terms of insecticide resistance, if it wasn't for WALS, we would really be hurting. I mean, our program is clearly much stronger with WALS than it otherwise would be. So we're pretty happy with it. We've gotten to where we're very convinced that it's a major part of our program now, and expect it to continue to be an important part of our program going forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Grayson. Our last speaker for this webinar is Katie Williams. Katie, would you be able to load your presentation?
Yes.
All right. Katie will be presenting on her works that was published in early 2022, a publication which has been widely assessed. She worked on truck-mounted application against Aedes aegypti in Manatee County Mosquito Control District. We are glad to welcome Katie, who is now my colleague at Valen Biosciences, to share her experience. Katie, over to you now.
Thank you so much. Yes, as she said, my name is Katie Williams. I will be talking today about a study that I conducted with Manatee County Mosquito Control. I was their senior research biologist at the time, and I worked closely with my coworker Samantha Ramirez and also Leanne Lake of Valen Biosciences. So basically, the reason that we wanted to do this is very similar to the other talks that you heard. Arboviruses such as dengue and Zika are always a concern in Florida, especially at the time. Approximately 77% of the locally acquired cases in Florida were acquired in 2020. But in Manatee County, our biggest concern was our pyrethroid resistance and our Aedes aegypti populations. We've done genetic testing with our Aedes aegypti, and we've done a lot of truck trials with our adulticides, and we're finding less than 10% mortality in our local populations of Aedes aegypti with certain pyrethroids that we were using. So it was really important for us to kind of figure out an effective way of targeting these mosquitoes, so that we were making sure that we were, protecting public health. In addition, as we all know, Aedes aegypti populations can exploit a very large number of habitats to lay their eggs. In Manatee County, we have many villages like this. This is Cortez Village with, backyards that have bird baths, boats, crab traps, etc., that hold water, where Aedes aegypti are heavily populated in these areas, and our manpower just isn't enough to reach all of these target areas. So finding a way to apply, a larvicide in an effective way was really important for us. So that's why we wanted to conduct the study using the WALS approach using Vector-Back WDG. So before we got started with the trial, we had to figure out where we were gonna test. And so we looked at our surveillance data of Aedes aegypti that we've been collecting since 2010 by setting out OV jars throughout the county. So we have about 5 or 6 sites spread throughout the county where we collect OV jars, hatch the eggs, ID the mosquitoes, et cetera. And so we have some really good data of some locations that are heavily populated with Aedes aegypti. And so for the purposes of this study, we chose Cortez Village, which is right before you get to Anna Maria Island. So as you can see here, we had 3 sites. We had our WALS treatment site. This site was approximately 23 hectares with 148 parcels that included houses with surrounding roads. And most of these parcels in this study site had the type of habitat that you saw in those previous pictures: planters, buckets, boats, rain gutters, and they tend to be abundant egg habitat for Aedes aegypti. The second study site was approximately 3,000 meters east of our treatment site. This was our untreated control site, and this is actually where Leanne Lake lives. And we use this site because we were also doing surveillance, Aedes aegypti surveillance here, and we knew that the population and the habitat was very similar to our treatment site. So we decided to go ahead and use that for our untreated control. And then our third site is where we did our open field droplet characterization before we did all of the operational field work. And this was just a 14-hectare open field farm that we used for all of our adulticide field trials at the time. So they were willing to let us use this for the day of our open field droplet characterization. The product that we used, again, we use this product for the entire study. We use Vector-Bac WDG. There's many reasons that we chose this, this type of application strategy and this product. One, the main reason being that this formulation is extremely environmentally friendly profile, OMRI certified, and because of its high target specificity. When we were telling people that we were going to be applying a product into their backyards with this big mist blower, they were very relieved to see like the product that we were using, and they were willing to let us put jars in their yards and use this product 8 times in their neighborhood. So it was the perfect product for this area, for these type of treatments for this neighborhood. So I just wanted to briefly go over the equipment that we used and kind of our setup. So we chose the A1 Super Duty larvicide mister. This is equipped with the Micronair AU5000 atomizer. The A1 comes with this, 379 liter tank, the 20 horsepower Honda engine, and also it comes set up with the Micronair set at 55 degrees with this 20 mesh screen. And just for purposes of this study, our application rate was 0.5 pounds per acre. We were looking for a flow rate of 3 gallons per minute, and we used a 12% mix. So that was, for each application, we were able to use just 25 pounds of product with 25 gallons of water. And then on this other picture, you can see our mixing station. This was a homemade mixing station that we made using 1 or 2 inch bulkhead through holes with PVC extension, ball valves, and PVC 90-degree angle pipes. We used 3 different hoses and hose couplings, a water pump, we had to buy the water pump separately, and then a 50-gallon rain barrel. And basically what we did with this mixing station is we filled it with the 25 gallons of water, and then we slowly poured the product in, turned the water pump on, and then this agitated the product before putting it into the tank of the A1 mister. So we could make sure that it was in solution and ready to go when we're ready for operational application. So before we got ready for the operational applications, the 8 applications, we wanted to make sure that our equipment was calibrated properly, that we had the appropriate droplet size for this study, so that we would know that we were ready to go on the night of our first application. So how we did this, as I said, we did this in an open field setting. We characterize our droplets using Backdrop software, which is a software program developed by VBC, by Banu. And we set out CD cases that with chroma code cards clipped onto them. And those are the cards that we use to collect the droplets. Next to those chroma code cards, we placed dry bioassay jars. And for the purposes of the droplet characterization, we mixed the product with red food dye. And so this was so that we could get the images of the droplets on the cards to analyze them. We set up 3 rows so that we would have 3 replicates. So we had rows A, B, and C, and they were approximately 30 meters apart. And then we set them up for a 300-foot or a 91-meter swath. We also monitored weather the day of this operational or open field droplet characterization, just using a weather tracker. And we set up 5 control stations upwind of the spray path. Once we were ready to go, we set the truck up perpendicular to that spray path. As you can see here in this figure, we started driving 200 feet before the first line and 200 feet after the last line, just to ensure that we were getting, our droplets throughout the entire spray grid. We waited for 10 minutes just to kind of let those chroma code cards dry so that we could, bring them back to the lab and analyze them. Then we collected the jars, put the lids on, collected those to bring those back to the lab. The first thing we did back at the lab was fill these bioassay jars with 100 milliliters of reverse osmosis water, along with 17 to 20 L2, L3 lab-reared Aedes aegypti. And we monitored for mortality in those jars up to 48 hours. And then Leanne did the droplet analysis using the Backdrop program. And in the next slide, I was just going to briefly go over what that entails. So for the purposes of for WALS applications, it requires a really unique droplet size and able to, reach the habitats that we're trying to reach. And we're trying to apply this product, and we want it to go over fences and houses, through canopy into cryptic habitats. So you have to have a specific droplet size. So we're looking in the range of extremely fine to fine. So that's around 30 to 235 microns. We use these cards that I was talking about, the chroma code cards. We scan them using a ScanSnap scanner, and we analyze them using Backdrop, and that gives us our overall VMD and NMD. And so once we were done with our open field characterization, we knew that our equipment was set and ready to go for our operational trials. So our operational trials consisted of a total of 8 BTI applications. We started in June and worked through August 2020. Our first 4 applications were conducted weekly, and then we conducted 4 applications bi-weekly. All of our applications were conducted at the same time in the evening around 9 o'clock. They usually took about 30 minutes for that one neighborhood to apply this product. We used a fixed route, as you can see here. We hit every street, every corner, everything you could get, so that we were ensuring that we were, hitting from both sides, because wind is a factor in hitting the targeted application sites. And we also monitored weather using a nearby booster tower so that we could determine what the wind speed and wind direction and temperature was. And this is just a great picture of what the spray looked like when they were applying. Oop. This is what our operational trial setup looks like. So in our treatment site, we used 20 residential parcels. So those are these pictures up top. In each individual parcel, we had, before application, we put 2 bioassay jars in, so for a total of 40 jars. We put a jar in the front yard and then 1 jar in the backyard in different types of coverage, which I'll show in the next slide, I believe. We also included 15 OV jars and did landing rate counts in these areas, and we set 10 BG Sentinel-2 traps in the treatment area. And then in our control site, we did 10 residential parcels with 1 bioassay jar in each, so a total of 10 bioassay jars. And then we also conducted surveillance in that area with 10 OV jars and landing rate counts and 10 BG Sentinel-2 traps. So basically, this is what our surveillance looks like. So we were collecting data on eggs. So collecting OV trap data once a week. And how we do this is we use little black jars and we place a piece of seed germination paper clipped into the little black jar. We fill that with reverse osmosis water that has been mixed with a 3-to-2 liver yeast slurry as an attractant. Weekly, we would collect those egg papers and count larvae in the jars. We would bring the egg papers back to the lab, hatch them in bottle breeders. We would record the adults and also identify the adults. We also ID'd larvae in the field. So what we were looking for here was Aedes aegypti. We did get a lot of culex in these jars. We did not include those in our data because we were mostly looking for Aedes aegypti numbers. And then for our adults, again, we used the BG Sentinel-2 traps that were lured with the BG lures. We set these once a week. We set them for 24 hours on a fixed day, collected them, and identified the species in the traps. In addition to that, we did landing rate counts twice a week. And for Aedes aegypti, in Manatee County, we do 3-minute landing rate counts, just because aegypti tend to be a little bit more hesitant to land right away compared to a nuisance mosquito. I had mentioned this in a previous slide. So these were the coverage types that we used for our trial. So we used 4 different coverage types, and we picked these randomly for each parcel. So we had the exposed to sky, completely exposed, our dense vegetation cover, our sparse vegetation cover, and then completely obstructed from the sky. So under tables, under houses, etc. For each application, so each application night prior to, we would bring and put out the jars in the homes. So we would go probably, sometime in the afternoon and leave the open jars in a fixed location. And then we would leave them out overnight. So the truck would apply at around 9 o'clock, and then we would pick up at 8 a.m. the next morning. We would bring the jars back to the lab, and again, we would fill those with 100 milliliters of reverse osmosis water. We would close the jar, shake them just to kind of suspend that BTI, and then we would add 17 to 20 L2, L3 lab-reared Aedes aegypti. We would monitor for larval mortality in these jars for 1, 3, 24, and 48 hours after infestation. And we did include any larvae that could not resurface or didn't react to prodding, we considered as dead for this study. So here are the results for all of the stuff we did. This is the results for our open field droplet characterization. And this is just showing you our, droplet size VMD for row A, B, C. This is just our average droplet size. And you can see here, right in the sweet spot, 185, 157, 238 micrometers. So we had some good droplet sizes. So we knew we were right in the wheelhouse for our calibration. We were ready to go. And here you see, our droplet density throughout that spray line. So that's 0 to 300 feet or 91 meters. Our droplet density kind of changed throughout. So that's the data that we used to determine that we were ready for our operational applications. We also did, for that open field characterization, the larval bioassays, and got some really good mortality at 48 hours. So this is row A, B, and C. As you can see here, we had around 70 to 100% mortality when our VMD was around 158 to 218. We had, some, not a lot, but some areas with little to no mortality. And that was when our droplet sizes were a little too small or a little too large. But overall, you can see total out to 91 meters, we had around 70% mortality for all 3 rows. And then here in the beginning, 9 to, I believe, 46 meters, we had 100% mortality throughout. So we know the product is killing our mosquitoes. We're, doing really well. So, and here you can see our larval bioassay results for our operational studies. So each little table is for each application. So here are the first 4 applications that were weekly. You can see that there's, pretty good mortality. This is in the field, and this is all the different coverage types. So you've got your covered, dense, exposed, and sparse. So we're looking at 70, 80% mortality in these areas, some up to 90. Overall, our treatment site showed, with a complete average, 77% plus or minus mortality compared to our untreated control site that had 0.21% mortality. So, the applications were reaching the jars, reaching over the houses, getting into those cryptic habitats, which was really good to see. And we did do, some analysis to show that there was actually no significant difference in mortality among the different coverage types. Again, we also wanted to check out, was our population decreasing over time with these 8 applications? And as I said, we, looked at BG sentinel trap counts, specifically female Aedes aegypti, and also landing rate counts. We did have a few things that happened, that kind of hampered some of our stuff. We would have preferred a longer baseline, without the applications. We only had a 2-week baseline here. That's because this was during COVID. So we were actually not at work the month before we started this. So we got back to work and just, hit the ball rolling. So we had to work quick. So usually we would have probably had a 4-week baseline here. Additionally, this season was extremely dry. We had, low rainfall compared to previous seasons. So I think we would have even seen a bigger difference in the control and treatment sites, if not for that. And then our control site, since we weren't applying there, we did get some service requests for adults, for our people to come in and do some adulticide spraying. So in our control site, we did have some Delta Guard applications throughout that trial that may have decreased that population a little bit, where we wouldn't have seen that otherwise. But all in all, we did see a significant difference in the BG female counts in our treatment site compared to our control, and same for our landing rate counts. We saw a significant difference in the population dynamics in our WALS treated area compared to our control. So we were pretty happy with the results that we got, despite the lower rainfall and lower population numbers that we typically have. So in conclusion, we found that these WALS applications with this A1 mister were effective at reducing disease-carrying mosquito populations in this area specifically, using this product, especially being implemented with an integrated vector management program. So, we didn't apply any adulticide during this time, but, we and we actually didn't need to. As you can see here, our residents in the Cortez area, in our treatment area, were extremely happy with the results that they received in their neighborhood. We got numerous people telling us how happy they were that it was completely different than it has been in previous years. And so we were pretty pleased with that and happy that they were happy. And if you need more detail on this study, it is published. If you want, you just go online. You can just Google Williams et al. WALS A1 Mister, and it'll pull up for you. And that's it.
Okay, thank you, Katie, for your detailed presentation. And I'll be helping to coordinate. I'm Selena here, and I'll be assisting to coordinate the Q&A session. There are a couple of questions basically on the equipment, but before I go to the questions, let me first of all say thank you to all the speakers, especially those from US. I mean, thank you to Topik and Rizal. Those from US, Philip, Dr. Browson, and Katie and Andrea. I know it's very late in the evening. Thank you for holding on. We are doing good on the time, and there are questions for some of the speakers here. And if time permits, we will, because there are some limited questions in the Q&A, but if time permits, we will request you all by requesting you all to raise your hand, and then we can unmute and you can ask your questions directly to the speakers. Okay, before I go on to the questions, I believe there were 2 requests from the attendees, and they could be Malaysians who were asking whether the attendance is there attendance for this course? That's the question. So I'm assuming that you could be asking for a certificate, or you could be asking whether the list can be provided to your heads of your department, and your points can be recorded for that. Yes, we are recording who is attending, but we need your full names. I can see some of you all have appeared here as anonymous. So please, if you want your full names to be recorded and to be noted, your attendance to be noted, please note down your complete names in the link that you have got on to this platform. Okay, so having said that, Mr. Tope, you have the first 2 questions. They were asking whether ORS and ULV was suspended where Wolbachia is in use.
Okay, okay, thank you, Ms. Salina. Okay, actually the answer is very true. Not only that, we have also set a buffer zone for each Wolbachia locality, and identify several localities within, as far as 200 meters from the boundary of the Wolbachia locality. So in those areas, I mean in the Wolbachia locality and plus the buffer zone, chemical control is not allowed at all. So we don't use any chemical control in that area. And then only outdoor source reduction and BTI level setting is permissible in that area. So meaning to say, ORS or whatever it is, as long as it's using chemical, it's not allowed in the Wolbachia area. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Topek. The next question is also for you, Mr. Topek. It's concerning the outdoor residual spray. They would like to know what is the insecticide use, okay, whether whatever insecticide that you are using for the ORS, has it been considered for insecticide resistant in the field strain? Okay. Was it assessed effectively as a preventive, or is it a control measure? And are you all also considering indoor RS residual spraying for dengue control.
Okay. For the first question, what insecticide used for RS? Okay, just like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the available insecticide in Malaysia for RS is limited. So, meaning to say we don't have much choice. So what we use now, we use K-Otin and also K-Otin polizone from these are the only two insecticide that's currently available in Malaysia. Because of that reason, we don't really consider the resistant issues of the insecticide. But of course, if we had known the area to be resistant prone, we wouldn't have chosen the locality as the area for RS method. And for the next question, was it accessible, assessed as effective? Okay, frankly speaking, I must say in certain area it is considered effective, but it depends on a lot of factors. One is that you have to make sure that the dominant vectors in that locality is Aedes aegypti, okay, for to have a good impact. As what Malaysian has experienced, the sprayed locality had shown lower case compared to the non-ORS locality. So that's why I can say that it is considered effective as far as Malaysia is concerned. And then for the last question, whether intention to to conduct IRS as well. Well, in order to make sure that there will be a positive impact, you have to make sure you have to you have to spray both indoor and outdoors. Unfortunately, it is it is so difficult to get the cooperation from the owner to allow RS to be done indoor. That's why we end up spraying in the semi indoor area where permission is not needed. So meaning to say, as much as we wanted to spray indoor, but unfortunately, because of the lack of cooperation from the public, we only confine our spray to the semi indoor or outdoor areas. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Topek. Andrea, there is a question for you, and I know you have answered, but maybe you can still answer it here on this platform. When you disperse BTI using the helicopter, how did you measure the outcomes of that dispersal?
Thank you, Ms. Selena. Thank you for the question. We did a number of different larval mortality readings. So we did something similar to what Katie was talking about, where you have, bioassay cups that are placed in the field, and then you bring them back and you put larvae in it and count larval mortality. We also measured larval mortality in field containers throughout the sites as well. And then ultimately we did look at adult BG sentinel collections, and we're comparing those populations within the treatment versus control areas. So we did a vast array of different ways to measure how it was working, and all were very positive.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. So you measured both larval and the adult collections, right? And I believe those of us from the ASEAN region here, that's our challenge. We are not able to use effectively the BG adult traps to measure the adult Aegypti or albopictus, especially the Aegypti population. We need to use ovid traps and sticky traps. So we are very much limited in using adult collection methods for Aegypti. especially Aegypti in this region compared to what you guys have, as BG is so very sensitive and is able to trap Aegypti in US region.
Yeah, and it's interesting because it's the complete opposite for us in the Keys. We have a difficult time collecting numbers of eggs and ovicups. And I think it might just be because there's so many different containers. So that BG Sentinel trap is really what we use to monitor adults. So that is very interesting, the differences between the regions.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. So before I go on, there are a couple of questions for Dr. Grayson and Katie, and it's basically towards the equipment. I would like to have a brief pause here. We are very honored throughout this webinar to have the formulator of back-to-back WG, that's Dr. Bala Devasity. He is sitting in throughout this webinar. Dr. Bala is retired, but he still remains our BBC technical consultant. Well, his formulation was the most that was discussed in this webinar that's being used either for aerial or truck mounted or mist blower. We thank him and we thank for the entire research team in BBC for developing this formulation. Because this formulation is so versatile, it can be applied as direct application in some countries and spray for the control of any Aedes, Anopheles, or Culex, or any other mosquito species. So for that, thank you, Dr. Bala. So moving forward, we have questions for Dr. Brown, Grayson Brown. Now, Dr. Brown, I know you have answered that, but it'll be good that if you can mention it again in this platform. The question was about the sprayers that you use, the truck mounted, the A1 ranges. We are in this region, we're very much interested in truck mounted spraying because for larviciding especially, we have used widely now the backpacks, especially in Malaysia and Singapore. So we'd like to further proceed to use the truck mounted for larviciding. So here are the questions that has been asked, that what was the swath or the distance for the A1 Ranger spray that you used in Puerto Rico, and the maximum capacity of the tank and the coverage of one tank, okay? And what are the equipments that it can fit into, the trucks that it can fit into? So Dr. Brown?
Sure, thank you very much. Yeah, so the volume on that unit, I believe, is 60 gallons, which would be something like around 220 liters. And then, yeah, we've used them in smaller trucks, the Nissan trucks in particular, 4-wheel drives. I think one of the issues about the trucks is you need to consider the capacity, not just the weight, but also the length of the bed in deciding on these units. So that's very important. The difference in the type of truck that you need to carry that Buffalo turbine, which we use a heavy duty pickup truck, 4-wheel drive, versus what you can carry in that A1 Ranger. Now that A1 Ranger is one of the smallest in the A1 series, but the difference in the price of the trucks for those that you need for those two vehicles, for those two sprayers, is about $30,000 in a new truck here, at least here in Puerto Rico. So it's a pretty significant decision. But anyway, you don't want to have your truck, right up at the maximum weight limit. Therefore, I don't know what the conditions are that you all deal with there in Malaysia, but like I said, we did something similar to this in Indonesia, and the roads there can be pretty rough. And going around some of these bouncy roads is bad enough. But once you get into the rainy season, some of those roads, the ones that are not paved, will just turn into a sea of mud. At least that was our experience, there in Sumatra. And so you need to make sure that truck has plenty of additional capacity. So you don't want to load the truck right up to the very, very limit. that makes sense. I think the other question there was swath width. And so we would consider the swath width on that to be about 75 yards, 75 meters in each direction, both directions, right and left.
Okay, okay. Thank you, Dr. Brown. Thank you for the detail.
You know, I'd be interested in hearing Katie's response to that to those same questions. So, because she will have more experience with that particular machine than I did.
Yeah, in fact, there is a question for Katie too on that related matter, Katie. Katie, maybe you can take on to answer. There is question on both these A1 Super Duty and the A1 Ranger, requesting on the different specifications, the advantages and disadvantages. So your response, Katie?
So I don't know a whole lot about the A1 Ranger. We use specifically the A1 Super Duty. So I don't know if that's, I don't know how different that is. Our tank is 100 gallons. We have to use we use a long bed truck for this, and you have to have a crane to put it into the truck. So you do need a big truck to hold the A1 Super Duty, you know, to be able to keep that in the truck. Some of the shorter bed trucks, you can put it in, however, you have to leave the bed open. So you have to make sure that it's tied up properly, so that it's not, you know, if you have to slam on your brakes, you're going, you know, in a real bumpy area, it's not sloshing around. But as far as the A1 Super Duty, yes, we used an all-wheel drive, I believe GMC pickup truck with a long bed. I'm not 100% sure on the Ranger. I know that the second question was about smaller type of equipment that you could use regarding this type of application. And Selena, I know you know that Leanne is working on this now. Currently, we're figuring out the A1 Cobra. So the A1 Cobra is very similar to the A1 Mister, but it's much smaller unit. It holds 40 gallons of product. It can be put on an ATV, so it's small enough for ATV use. And so Leanne's working on getting some of those and working on nozzle types to use for that equipment for y'all's purposes. So as we get those specifications and learn more about it, we will let you guys know, you know, and I think Leanne's gonna set one up for you, Selena, as far if I'm correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, right. So thanks, Katie. Thanks, Dr. Brown, on the specifications. Well, one thing we know for sure from these presentations that we had today was we need, based on the success that you guys have had in your region in Puerto Rico and US, you did use a wide area coverage, okay? And this wide area coverage needed those fine droplets to reach out to all those habitats that's cryptic and all around for Aegypti, and also I believe for Albopictus, okay? So yes, for us in this region, truck mounted backpacks are okay, but truck mounted are a challenge to get. And Leanne did mention that Wilhelm Bioscience is really putting in their efforts. They realize that product is good, but we need to have a proper equipment in this region. So they are doing the testing on, we call it A1 prototype or A1, the Cobra.
It's the Cobra, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, it's the Cobra. So, well, we still want the specifications that's there on that A1 Super Duty on the Cobra. Okay, we are demanding here because we have a lot of distance to achieve without able for any vehicle parts to go to that, at least about 70, 80 meters, okay? So Leanne said, yep, she's working on it, and to put on a nozzle, same thing that you will have as your micro nozzle, but it's going to be a different model of the nozzle so that we can still get the fine droplets. So let's see how that pans out, and we can have it here in this region where we can have a wider coverage. So yes, equipment is so very important. So before I go on, and we got a couple more minutes, is there any questions from other participants? Because we have answered all the questions from the Q&A portal. Is there any other questions from the participants? You may raise your hands and we can unmute and you can ask your question here directly. Anyone? We still have a couple more minutes.
I'd like to make a quick comment if I can.
Yes,
And that is if you all are considering equipment, be sure to also consider the mixing equipment. Katie showed the homemade mixers. There's commercial units. You know, that's an extremely important and really kind of significant time-consuming effort in using these machines. So don't skimp on looking at mixing equipment. This is not a product you're going to be able to, mix very effectively with, a paddle.
Sure. Thank you very much, Dr. Brown, for the advice. At the time being, in some areas where they were using this truck-mounted, and the truck-mounted, they were using IGBA and TIFA, they were using the mechanical sprayers, the electrical sprayers from the what's that's being used in the construction sites and things like that. Yes, we take your advice and we'll remember to have the ones that Katie showed just now, the homemade mixing equipment. Thank you.
Yeah, and if you're using something like the Cobra, which is a much smaller tank, you don't need as big of a rain barrel. You don't need as big of a system set up, so that was set up for 50, that's a 50 gallons. So you could get a smaller setup for the purposes of the Cobra, I'm sure. So it wouldn't be as cumbersome. But Leanne is the one who made that mixing station. So when the time comes and you're ready to develop a mixing station for your purposes, we'll be here to help with that as well.
Okay, thank you, Katie. And all those who are out there listening to this, I know you come from different countries. We have participants from different countries. Now, let me thank you all, those who have attending this from all the way from Bangladesh and Pakistan. I know the time was very early in the morning compared to us, those of us from Malaysia and Singapore. Thank you for joining us. We are, whatever that we are developing for all countries in this region. Okay, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have. Anyone out there? Okay, if there are no questions, Banu, do you have any final comments, Banu?
Nope, Selena, nothing from me.
Okay, so I would like to say thank you. Thanks to all participants. Thanks to all speakers. And thanks to everyone in the BBC team who helped to put together this webinar. If there are any questions, I believe there will be, and if you would like to contact us for any questions on how to go forward, I'm now sharing my screen with our contact emails. Okay, can you all see? Okay, please do not hesitate to contact any one of us, myself, Kyo, or Banu, or Bet, okay, for any information that you will need. And we not only help out in dengue control or Zika and chikungunya, even for malaria control, okay? It can be spray application, it can be direct application. So please feel free to contact us at any time. And thank you. Let me see. I think there's one more. Is there one more? Let me see. No more questions. Okay. So thanks